What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tyler Plath, and we are back with another edition of Waiver Wire Monday after a week 3 where we saw some unreal performances. Okay, we saw Keenan Allen go off for 45 fantasy points, where he had 18 receptions on 20 targets for 215 yards, and also just a cherry on top, he threw a touchdown too. And then we saw the Dolphins running backs put up a combined 104 fantasy point performance. They rushed for 360 yards, had 5 rushing touchdowns, had 3 receiving touchdowns. Video game numbers. Those are literal Madden numbers. And one of those running backs is actually in this video. So before I get going, make sure you're subscribed, because we are here to break everything down and to tell you everything you need to know so that you can build the best possible squad to win your leagues this year. As always, these guys are rostered in less than 50% of leagues on average between ESPN, Yahoo, and Sleeper. So there's a good chance that these guys are available in your league. So in no particular order, let's start with the first guy, who is Achane. He is the Dolphins running back I referenced earlier. Of the 360 rushing yards that all Dolphins running backs had, he had 203 of them. Of the 5 rushing touchdowns, he had 2 of those. And of the 3 receiving touchdowns, he had 2 of those. And according to Pro Football Network, Achane's total is the 7th highest fantasy point total in a single game since 1970. That's when the merger happened back in 1970. So ever since then, the 7th highest fantasy point total, which is absurd, which is his first real game. You know, he had a rushing attempt and he had a reception in week 2, but this was the first game where we really saw him in a full-on role, and he made the most of it and made a very strong case to continue being on the field moving forward. Jeff Wilson is coming back, and it looks like he'll be back in week 5, so we'll see what the backfield will look like at that point, but as I said, Achane is going to be on the field. Like, McDaniel would be stupid to not keep Achane at least in his game plan in some way, because when the ball touches his hands, magic happens. So, Achane, there's a good chance that he's available in your leagues. Go at him, because he's going to see some serious action in the weeks ahead. Next up is Chargers wide receiver Josh Palmer, and he has been the Chargers wide receiver 3. We have been all over this because there was a ton of buzz, a ton of noise about Quentin Johnston being one of the sneakiest mid to late round wide receivers. And Josh Palmer has said, hold my beer, I'm not going away anytime soon. And especially after what happened in week 3, don't go add the wrong guy. Don't go add Quentin Johnston. Josh Palmer is the guy to target. Josh Palmer has doubled and even tripled Quentin Johnston's snap counts through the first 2 games of the season. And Mike Williams left week 3 with a pretty bad and what looked to be a pretty serious knee injury. I would be shocked if Mike Williams does not go on IR or misses a good chunk of the rest of the season. It was bad. So that opens up opportunity. And I've spent too much time on Quentin Johnston. It's not Quentin Johnston that you should be adding. It's Josh Palmer. And if Josh Palmer isn't available, there's one other guy we'll talk about later that is also on the Chargers. But Josh Palmer is the number 1 option on the Chargers in Mike Williams' absence, who is going to step up. Add him this week if he's available. Let's talk about Texans wide receiver Tank Dell next, and he's going to be the other fantasy relevant wide receiver in Houston. So let that previous statement, let that be your confirmation that Nico Collins is going to be a key fantasy piece moving forward. And I know he just put up a dud in week 3, but it is going to be Nico Collins and Tank Dell that are going to be the most productive in fantasy from the Texans. Tank Dell in back-to-back weeks has put up 20 or more fantasy points, and those were good for top 20 finishes. Now, this Texans team is still not very great. And I know they just walked into Jacksonville and smacked them. I know this. But I don't necessarily think we can expect consistent performances from Nico Collins and Tank Dell. And when I say that, I mean like top 20 finishes. I can't expect that kind of consistency out of either of those guys. But these finishes show that there is a reality, there's a possibility that it can happen again. And as we get more and more into our bye weeks, which are, I want to say, 2-3 weeks away at this point, Tank Dell is someone to stash away, because when those bye weeks come around, let's just say Tank Dell hits for another 20-point week when you do have to sit someone on a bye week. That might win you your week. Adam Thielen is next on the list, and he's rostered in 52% of leagues on average, so technically he doesn't meet the 50% criteria, but we need to talk about Adam Thielen because it has now been back-to-back weeks where we've seen 20-plus fantasy points from him. He's seen 9 targets or more in both of those games. He's scored in both of those games. We knew he was going to be the wide receiver 1 on the Panthers. It did take a week, but I think we can safely say that he's here. He's finally emerged as the wide receiver 1 just based on fantasy production. And this passing game for the Panthers is slowly coming together, and it helps that they have DJ Chark back in the fold now, because DJ Chark, as the deep threat, can take the top off the defense. In the previous 2 games, they didn't have that. So the defense is continually just creeping forward because they know that they're not going to throw the ball deep. Now that DJ Chark is back in the fold, defense has to respect it a little bit. They have to play back, which opens up the short game, the area close to the line of scrimmage. That opens it up for Adam Thielen, which is where he's going to thrive. And when the offensive line is still figuring it out, like it is, you got to get the ball out quick, and that favors Adam Thielen as well. Now, we have seen one Giants game without Saquon Barkley, and while it was an ugly and tough matchup against the 49ers, Matt Breida saw 82% of the team's snaps. He is the clear fill-in for Saquon Barkley while he's out. Now, Matt Breida didn't do a whole lot on those snaps because the Giants just couldn't run the ball. But Breida did find the end zone, and he had 3 receptions. So those stats, along with the snap count, Breida makes a very strong case to be added in easier matchups moving forward. Obviously, he comes with the asterisk that he may not play as much next week if Saquon Barkley comes back. But if Saquon doesn't come back and he's out another week, Matt Breida is clearly the running back that they are going to play. If I'm not mistaken, it was like an 80-20 split between Matt Breida and Gary Brightwell. So again, if Saquon Barkley is out, you're a Saquon manager and you need a replacement, Matt Breida is available, that's the guy to go get. So Matt Breida, again, he comes with the asterisk, but the snap count, the rushing touchdown that he had, the 3 receptions, there's a lot to like about Matt Breida going into next week. The Titans offense, just simply put, is one of the ugliest units in the league in terms of production and execution. But there's a very, very important note with this offense, and it involves Tyjae Spears. Derrick Henry does not have the same role as we have seen in years past. Now you're asking, well, what does that mean? It means that Tyjae Spears is seeing the field a lot more than we expected to. Right, Derrick Henry is getting up there in age, so you could say it is it is more understandable that Derrick Henry isn't having the same kind of volume that he used to get. But looking at week 3, the first half snap counts between Tyjae Spears and Derrick Henry, when the Titans were down 13-3, Derrick Henry had seen only 7 snaps. Tyjae Spears had seen 18. 18. Doubled Derrick Henry's snap count. The point of Derrick Henry not having the same role is is one of the bigger takeaways that is kind of flying under the radar. So I don't think Tyjae Spears has any starter value until we're proven otherwise, but he may be worth considering, because if the Titans offense continues to sputter and struggle, we're probably going to see more Spears. That's more opportunities for fantasy production. So if you're the Derrick Henry manager, I would absolutely consider going and stashing Tyjae Spears away. Or maybe you are just looking for a deep flyer. Tyjae Spears might be the guy for that. Because again, this Titans team, I'm going to say, is going to be playing from behind in most of the games just based on how the first 3 weeks of the season have gone. So that means more opportunity for Spears. Maybe he makes the most of them. Who knows? But it's worth stashing just in case that happens. Next guy on our list was on our week 1 waiver list. That's Packers wide receiver Romeo Doubs. Welcome back, Romeo. After not doing a whole lot in week 2, he was back in week 3, and he found the end zone, and he saw 12 targets. Now, granted, he only caught 5 of them, but still, 12 targets is not just a number to blink at when it comes to Romeo Doubs, especially when Jordan Love is the one throwing him the ball. Christian Watson is close to returning, so we could put another little asterisk on Romeo Doubs, but we may be close to the end of starting fantasy potential when it comes to Romeo Doubs, but Doubs is still worth the add and stash because of the red zone possibilities. He scored twice against Chicago. Jordan Love looked his way twice. Looked his way again in the Saints game. And there's an obvious rapport between Jordan Love and Romeo Doubs, and it's not even a guarantee that Watson is going to come back and see immediate success because Love and Watson haven't played in an actual game together yet this year. So with Romeo Doubs, this is probably more of a stash than it is a, wow, this guy could actually find your lineup. But if you're a Christian Watson owner, this is the guy I'd look at and look to add, because you'd hate to see Romeo Doubs outproduce Christian Watson. And I'm not going to sit here and say that that's definitely going to happen, because I don't think that's going to happen. But I don't think it's going to be right away where we see Christian Watson outproduce Romeo Doubs. So until Christian Watson is fully back, having Romeo Doubs as a nice little insurance policy is not the worst idea in the world. Josh Downs, wide receiver for the Indianapolis Colts, is the next guy, and this is a very under-the-radar waiver option. Just looking at his week 3 performance, Josh Downs saw 12 targets, and he caught 8 of those. Yes, that was with Gardner Minshew, and he has seen that same amount of targets in only 2 games with Anthony Richardson, where one game Josh Downs saw 5 targets and the next he saw 7. So Josh Downs is now sitting at 24 targets, but it was only in 2 games that he matched the total. This is probably more of a keep tabs of than it is an add. Because outside of Michael Pittman and Zach Moss, until Jonathan Taylor comes back, Josh Downs has arguably been the next productive player on the Colts. I know Kylan Granson had a game. We haven't really seen a whole lot out of Alec Pierce. So, like I said, Josh Downs is arguably the next productive player on the Colts. So we're going to switch it up with the last 2, and I'm going to give you one streaming tight end option and one streaming quarterback option, because you probably have your starting tight end. You probably still have your starting quarterback, but if you don't, these are the guys I would go look for out on waivers, and there's not a guarantee that these guys are available. But if they are, and you're not so sure about your quarterback, not so sure about your tight end, these might be the guys you should go play instead of your own guys. Starting with our quarterback stream, it's Jordan Love. And I know may or may not have sounded like I ragged on Jordan Love when talking about Romeo Doubs, and I promise you I wasn't trying to. But Jordan Love performed yet again. 3 straight weeks with 20 or more fantasy points. He came into Sunday's action in week 3 as the quarterback 3, and if I'm not mistaken, he was the quarterback 2 before Thursday Night Football. He showed it against the Saints. He showed off the legs, and he threw another touchdown too. So he's got 7 passing touchdowns on the year now, and he has a rushing touchdown. And the reason why I put Jordan Love as the quarterback stream is because he's got the Lions next week. And I know the Lions just held Desmond Ridder to 6 fantasy points, so not super great. But we have talked enough. We have talked extensively, and we probably still haven't talked about it enough, just how frustrating this Falcons offense is. So when you put the Lions up against teams that are more happy to throw the ball, like the Chiefs and the Seahawks, who the Lions have played in their first 2 games this year, Lions averaged 21 fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. So Jordan Love, for how productive he's been so far this year, with next week's matchup, divisional matchup, Thursday Night Football at home at Lambeau, in a bit of a revenge game too, because this is the first matchup since Detroit knocked Green Bay out of the playoffs, even though, it was a Week 18 matchup. Green Bay is going to be looking for some revenge. I like Jordan Love this week against Detroit. When he's been as productive as he's been in a revenge game at home, I feel like that's a pretty straightforward reason to have Jordan Love in your starting lineup, other than just the fact that he's a top 5 quarterback through three weeks of fantasy football. And our tight end stream is Cam's favorite player. I reference him when I talked about Josh Palmer as the other Chargers player to potentially look for. It's Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett. With Mike Williams likely to miss some time, Everett is going to see an expanded role, or at least he should see an expanded role. And if we use the handy-dandy yards per route run metric, which we've dropped a couple times, it's a great stat. It's one of the best metrics to use to predict future success. Everett came into week 3 as the tight end 3 in yards per route run. And in fact, he was a yard or 2 short from finding the end zone against the Vikings. So turning 6 receptions and 30 yards, 9 fantasy points, into 15 if he had scored. In games without Mike Williams last year, which was 4 of them, technically it was 4, but he got hurt in one of them. So you look at those 3 games. Gerald Everett averaged 10 fantasy points per game. Now, that doesn't mean that Everett will have the same kind of production this year. It's a very different play caller, very different offense. But potentially losing Mike Williams is a big loss. Adding Gerald Everett gives you a chance at finding the next guy up in the offense. Personally, I would bet that Josh Palmer is that guy, but it may be worth taking the shot on Gerald Everett as the next guy up. All right, that wraps up the 10 guys to look for on your waiver wire after week 3. A quick recap of those 10 guys: Devon Achane, Josh Palmer, Tank Dell, Adam Thielen, Matt Breida, Tyjae Spears, Romeo Doubs, Josh Downs, Jordan Love, and Gerald Everett. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow discussing the biggest takeaways from week 3, and then Cam will give you the newest edition of our buy low, sell high videos. Don't want to miss that. Make sure you're subscribed. Turn on that notification bell to be notified when we're posting, because again, you got takeaways coming tomorrow. You have buy low, sell high on Wednesday. You have matchup previews on Thursday for week 4, and then you have Lucas coming in with starts of the week on Friday. So again, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you have that notification bell turned on to be notified whenever we post, so you don't miss any of the good content and info that we are giving you. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one.